everybody, and welcome to a special bonus episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist, a real-life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, here to serve clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. And today's episode, as promised, is going to be a deep dive on BetterHelp, Talkspace, and a couple of other online mental health platforms. So how this originated was that I got a message, a DM, a couple months ago from a listener who had asked me what I thought of the BetterHelp controversy. For those of you who listen to a lot of podcasts, you'll know that BetterHelp is often a sponsor of a lot of podcasts, some podcasts that I love. And when the listener sent that to me, I thought, well, that's weird. I haven't, heard anything about that. But if I'm being honest, sometimes I'm kind of under a rock. I'm watching the shows that I'm talking about. I'm doing my podcast. I'm focusing on my health. And I don't see it all. I don't always know what's happening. So I did a little research and I was just blown away at some of the problems with some of these platforms. And so what people have come to appreciate about me in this podcast is that thanks to my type A personality and my borderline obsessive need to seek truth and to research and to find things, I have so much information that, we're just going to get right into this today because I don't want this to be a 2-hour podcast. That's just too long for everybody involved, I think. And there is so much information. So before I get into all of that specific information, there's a couple of things that I want to say because I'm aware, I have a lot of people that follow me who are professionals and who are patients and who are both, right? I'm a professional and I'm a patient. Sometimes some of the best professionals are both. Or certainly have been both at some times in their lives. I think it's always good. Unfortunately, not all counseling programs require this. Some counseling programs do. They require you to be a part of therapy before you provide it. I personally think that's really important. There are medical doctors and practitioners that they are forced to undergo certain procedures. So for example, I had an ENT procedure done where they put a camera, up my nose and kind of down my throat. And it was super uncomfortable, but the doctor was talking about how, he understood because they, were forced to do that in school. And it kind of helps, it helps your perspective when you understand what your patient is going through and how something may feel and things like that. So I think it's just generally good practice for therapists not only to participate in therapy for the general understanding of what it is, but also therapists are all human and we all go into this field for different reasons. Some of us for reasons that are not incredibly healthy. And so the problem is when you have an unhealed person, right, that's going into to do therapy, to lead therapy and to be a therapist, but they have a lot of these blind spots or unhealed or at least unaddressed parts of themselves because healing isn't linear, right? It's, it's a continuous process and it's kind of like grief where you can be in a maintenance stage and then something happens and all of a sudden you're back to depression, anxiety, what have you. So I just want to say that there are good therapists and there are bad therapists, period. So the platform to me, I'm gonna outline some of the concerns I have about some of these platforms. I'm gonna share with you all information that I gathered about some privacy concerns, confidentiality concerns, selling of data, things like that. But it is important to know that a good therapist can and will be good anywhere, and a bad therapist can and will be bad anywhere. Let me just be really clear about that, okay? In my 22 plus year career, every single place that I've worked at, whether it was an agency, whether it was private practice, whether it was inpatient, outpatient, addiction, mental health, whatever, there have always been people that I've worked with that have been wonderful and amazing at their jobs, really proficient, educated, good at what they do. And there have been people that are not so great at what they do. And so I kind of find that there's a category of folks where there are people who are great and, they work on their stuff personally. They, work on things professionally. They continue to grow and do research and, continuing education and stuff is great, but it's how are you utilizing that continuing ed? Are you just using it to check off your licensure list, or are you using it to really learn and grow and become a better therapist? So for me, I do come at this topic with a very, very passionate love of therapy. I believe therapy is a gift, and I believe that the people who kind of talk down on talk therapy or who talk about how it doesn't work or whatever, I feel like sometimes those folks are misinformed. Either they've never participated in it done well, or they've never done it well. I'm not trying to be shady, but talk therapy, whatever approach you're coming from, whether it's CBT or DBT or, family systems or whatever theoretical orientation you take, it doesn't matter. It's about who is the person that's sitting in front of me and assessing each and every client uniquely, because people are like snowflakes and we're all unique. So I don't believe in a one size fits all approach. Number one. And number two, I think that when therapy is done right, I've done it right. And I've had, I participate in therapy myself. I've had it done wrong a lot. Most people have heard me kind of joke about how I had a counselor once who fell asleep while I was talking. And then another one who during telehealth was literally smoking a brisket, and not just the whole time, not just oh, sorry, I have to check this, my bad. It was she was like Emeril Lagasse. She was like, oh, let me tell you about my spice rub and what I'm doing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So even myself, right? And I have a good picker. Sometimes we get into therapy and we find out it's not a great fit. And so I'm always an advocate for, regardless of the platform, regardless of where you're getting therapy, listen to your gut. If you're feeling like this isn't a match for me, this doesn't make sense to me, this behavior is odd, and vice versa, as a practitioner too, not every client is going to be a fit for us. And so I think it's just about whether you're a patient or practitioner, it's looking at your gut and does this, what I'm doing right now, feel right for me with this person, with this platform? Because I do think that there is a stigma out there with therapists that I do just want to talk about for a minute before we get into all this, which is that therapists deserve to make a living wage. And a lot of times we don't. It's wild to me, the overrepresentation in terms of how people expect therapists to behave. Number one, we're not supposed to be human. And number two, we're just supposed to do this for free or little to no money. And it's just here's what I want people to think about. Whatever it is you do for work, would you do that for free? I don't care how much you love something, how much your passion, is, or with this podcast, I love what I'm doing and it's so wonderful, but we all have the right to make a living wage. And therapists, there is this weird stigma that oh, if you really want to help people, well, then you should do a session for no money, or you should do whatever. Listen, all situations are different. And I certainly have seen people for next to nothing if that is what the financial situation requires. But there has to be a happy medium between doing the work, really being an advocate, really being passionate about it, but also making a fair living wage. And most therapists really don't make that. And so one of the things that I want to come at from this perspective is with Better Health and Talk Therapy and all of these online platforms, I'm looking at it from both perspectives. And from both perspectives, I'm going to share professionals who have been on there, their insights. I have tons of testimonials, people that have reached out to me, patients and practitioners who have talked about, here's what happened to me, here were my concerns, whether it be BetterHealth or Talkspace or some other thing. So I'm going to read that as well. I just, the reason I'm really passionate about this is because therapy is so special to me. It makes me wild that some of these stories that I got, and I will read anonymously, of course, lights my soul on fire in terms of I just cannot ever support anyone taking advantage of people who are seeking help. It makes my brain want to explode. I just can't even handle it. So I think that part of what I'm going to talk about today is how, people seeking therapy and therapists who are just trying to make a living, right? Because unfortunately, whether you work for an agency or private practice, there's a lot of costs associated with or things that we don't get paid for, just to be really clear with you guys. So when I was in private practice, if you're seeing 30 clients a week, which is literally just direct contact hours. So, imagine 30 to 40, contact hours of listening to someone that much per week. That's just part of the job. And then the other part that we don't get paid for or reimbursed for is all the extra stuff. So if let's say you have a caseload of 30 people, which is a lot, but therapists sometimes get forced to push themselves to the point of burnout because, in my opinion, the therapy space, there's a lot of toxicity coming from the top down, meaning, insurance companies or these online platforms, they want to push therapists to be essentially, it's like a puppy mill. So the more money we make, then the more money they make. And it's easy for people who don't have a healthy moral or ethical compass to just want to use and abuse people until they're completely burnt out. And so, unfortunately, what happens in this field is there is not enough advocacy for therapists themselves. So I'm here to just be a absolute fierce advocate for therapists, for clients, and I don't want anyone taken advantage of. So what I'm going to outline today is some of the issues, not only with BetterHealth, with Talkspace, with some of these platforms, but I'm also going to list some good options that I've researched extensively. And all of this information, I will share my sources so that you can all go and look at that as well. And I also am going to share, I found this really great informational list about ways to search for a therapist if you don't want to use an online platform. And I'm going to explain the differences in all this, but if you don't want to use an online platform, but you do need to do online therapy for whatever reason, there are other ways to do Zoom or online therapy, finding a therapist from one of these more reputable sources. So, that's kind of my disclaimer for this. And here's the last thing is that seeking help is always good, right? And I know therapy is not for everybody and it's not always accessible to everybody, but for those who want it, I want to help you understand how to make it accessible. So patients and practitioners listening to this, if you are doing BetterHealth or you're doing Talkspace and you're having good experiences, great. Don't panic. I'm just outlining some of what maybe as a clinician and as a client, what to look out for if you do have a gut feeling like this doesn't feel right to me. So part of this too, right, is validating all of these people who have sent me so many DMs. Like I've gotten so much feedback about this episode before I even recorded it. And so that makes me very sad, but also makes me hopeful that people can just hear my voice and hear what I'm saying and understand that don't give up on therapy just because you ran into one or two or a couple people who clearly didn't know what they were doing. Unfortunately, in this space, there's a lot of those folks. There's same thing, doctors, nurses, all medical and mental health professionals are human. Therefore, they have their stuff, right? And so not all are going to be created equal. So my message to people is self-advocate in terms of, I've had to fire doctors, therapists. As I just told you, I fired those other 2 therapists. I finally am with someone who is an amazing, wonderful fit for me, and I trust implicitly. That should be what therapy feels like. Okay, so let's get into it. So I'm going to start by talking about what is BetterHelp and how getting started and things like that, because I want to outline what they're saying they provide, and then I'm going to share the stories from people about that. So for this section, I looked at our BetterHelp review 2024. Is this online therapy worth it? Medically reviewed by Jocelyn Jelinek, who is a licensed clinical social worker, and it's by Danielle Dresden. So this was updated on January 29th, 2024. So the information that I'm getting on BetterHelp was either from their website or from these peer-reviewed kind of online articles. So BetterHelp was founded in 2013 and is based in Silicon Valley. I know it's not Silicon or Silicone, but I think it's Silicon Valley. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. In 2015, a major telehealth company called Teladoc acquired it, but they kept the original brand name. And so what happens sometimes with these companies, that they make a ton of money and they become humongous businesses, and then they get bought out, and then to me, sometimes that's when stuff starts to fall apart, because this is a multi-billion-dollar company. So, for me, that's always a red flag in terms of when you're dealing with privacy and confidentiality and trying to have good practitioners. When you have a big platform like this, there are things that fall through the cracks, right? Because when I was in private practice, I was with a group, right? It wasn't mine. I was with a group. And there were people in that group. When we started, it was small. It was wonderful. And then it turned into a puppy mill, a therapy mill. And what I noticed and what I witnessed with my own eyeballs was that people were being hired without being asked questions, without they weren't being assessed and vetted to be a part of the practice. It was more just like a warm body. And guess what? Clients ended up being hurt by that. And I ended up having to step away because of my health. But if it was not for my health, I would have stepped away anyway, because that's not, it turned into something really gross. And so my point is that whether it's a local private practice in your community or a big thing like this, the more money people make, the more greedy people get, and then the more people are hired. And then if that's not checked, it's like quality control, right? So you could probably go on BetterHelp, and there are amazing therapists who are just great and wonderful, and they're doing it to survive, because as I said, therapists don't really make a full living wage, and sometimes they have to have a couple jobs, which is complete bullshit. So I don't fault therapists for wanting to try to utilize these spaces. They give a lot of promises to therapists, and then unfortunately don't follow through, which I'm going to talk about a bit. So the BetterHelp platform, it says it allows a person to access professional counselors anywhere at any time. Individuals can use a computer, tablet, or smartphone to seek counseling services, which makes the process more convenient, flexible, and affordable than in-person appointments. It also allows a person to maintain their privacy while receiving therapy. And that is when I'm going to tell you about this controversy with BetterHelp, people do need to maintain their privacy, and that has not happened with many of these platforms in egregious ways. Okay. So yes, in-person therapy for me is preferable in terms of that's how I like to provide therapy, and that's how I like to get therapy. I don't like telehealth. I don't like it. I need to see the person. I need to look at nonverbals. I need to look at body language. That is part of my process. However, there are people who A, prefer it, or B, whether you're disabled or agoraphobic, or if you have a disability that makes it challenging for you to seek it out, right? Online therapy is a wonderful option. And if it's done right, it can still be as great as in-person therapy, but that's the key, if it's done right. So here's what it says with how to get started with BetterHelp. Okay. So individuals register online. And by the way, I went and I did some research on this, so I'll share that with you too. Individuals register online to use BetterHelp. They fill out an online questionnaire that seeks information such as gender, age, sexual orientation, relationship status, religion, etc. So it is basically an online assessment, which part of being a therapist usually, I love self-assessment. It helps me inform my treatment plan and practice with a person, but there are agencies and places that someone will do the intake and then they assign the therapist based on appropriateness. And so if that's really how that's being done, then it's helpful. But a lot of times it's not. It's just like, well, this person's going to do the intake and then it's disjointed. And then you're just going to put them with whatever therapist is available. And so there is sometimes breakdowns in communication that can happen there. The questionnaire also asks a person's objectives in seeking counseling and the types of issues they're experiencing. A person may also select any characteristics they want in a counselor, such as religion, gender, ethnicity, right? So that all sounds great. In theory, that sounds great. But keep in mind, right? You are doing all of this information online. So you're putting in all very sensitive information about why you're seeking therapy on their website, and they're promising privacy. But then it takes a turn. So BetterHelp then reviews a person's completed questionnaire, pairs them with the appropriate counselor, can take up to a few days. Okay. So once the company matches the person with a therapist, that person gains access to a private chat room where they can communicate with their counselor. The chat room allows people to schedule live messaging, phone, or video visits. Okay. So this chat room concept with therapy, I have some concerns about that and reservations, especially, well, I'll get to that in a minute. Okay. And so there's a couple of, so as I'm kind of reading this, there's a reason why I'm doing this incrementally. Okay. Because there's kind of these red flags that started to pop up for me, but I was like, okay, I don't want to judge based on one thing. And, I understand nothing's perfect. So here's the thing. It says, who should not use BetterHelp? Okay. So BetterHelp is unsuitable for minors or those under the care of a legal guardian. However, there is a teen aspect of their better health. So that kind of confuses me. Those with court orders to attend therapy, people without access to a reliable internet connection. I mean, obviously, okay, that one makes sense. And then people who are in a mental health crisis or need urgent support should not use BetterHelp or any online therapy service. They should seek help at the services listed below. And then they basically just listed like 911 and they did list some resources, but here's why this is a flag for me. Lots of crisis help is available online completely confidentially and anonymously. 988 Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 988. There's text lines, RAIN, and there all these other websites. They provide text and chat and all these options. So for me, what I clock back here, which we all know that when I clock something, I just can't, it just sticks in my craw. I feel that there's a lot of places that treat people who maybe have lower socioeconomic status or crisis-oriented mental health concerns, more serious mental health issues. I feel they get treated as disposable, and I won't stand for that. I won't stand for it. I don't like it. And for me, this feels very like we want to make our money. We want to treat people who it just, here's the other thing that I'll say. Throughout my tenure in this field, there's cases that are easier than others. And to me, there's definitely spaces in the mental health space where people, agencies, whatever, they just don't want to do the hard work. They don't want to do the crisis work. They don't want to, they're afraid of people with psychotic disorders or, there's a lot of stigma. And I I'm just not here for that, because all people deserve proper treatment and health and accessibility. So that for me was a major red flag. Okay, now major red flag number 2. What kind of therapy does BetterHelp offer? Great question. So obviously individual therapy is like one of the main ones. They offer couples therapy. And so I'm going to read you it when it said on their site what types of therapy they do. There was this something after each one that for me just kept being red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. So couples, this therapy is beneficial for a person and their partner. If a person chooses this option, BetterHelp directs them to Regain, which it also operates. Teens, as I mentioned, people can choose to set up counseling for teenagers. BetterHelp redirects them to teen counseling, which the company also operates. Pride. The company can match people with a therapist experienced in LGBTQIA+ matters by directing them to Pride counseling, which it also happens to operate. And then, let's see, Faithful. The company directs individuals interested in religious-based counseling services to Faithful Counseling, which it also operates. Oh, and group therapy. They offer group therapy sessions called groupinars that focus on specific mental health challenges, and it can involve up to 15 people. Okay, here's my point. There is a lot of shady. That's a shady practice, in my opinion, so if you're using BetterHelp, they have all these niches. I assume that earns them money or other income, where they can use it's like a spider, right? Or an octopus with all these tentacles, which, by the way, I've been watching the octopus murders or conspiracy thing on Netflix, and it has been wild. Maybe I'll cover that. I'm not sure. But it just is very, it just does not sit well with me. These are red flags. I think it's just ways to corner the market. And so I'm going to go ahead and read you my first testimonial. So talking about the Pride counseling. So again, the company claims to match people with a therapist experienced in LGBTQIA+ matters, which not all therapists are created equal, right? All therapists, in my opinion, should be culturally competent when it comes to BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, LGBTQIA+ communities, but that is not always the case, right? Therapists are humans, and so if they're led by a certain religion or if they have blind spots, it's easy for people to take a uninformed but like concrete view that they have and spew their stuff onto other people. And so, okay, here's how this goes. Anonymously, of course. Thank you so much for calling out BetterHelp on your podcast. I had the worst experience with them. I asked for a counselor who was LGBTQ aligned, and she proceeded to question me about what happened to our son to, quote, make him gay, end quote. I need to take a deep breath because this kind of stuff makes me full of full rage. She said that in her experience, there was always in caps, some traumatic event or experience that caused someone to be gay. This is what the therapist said, okay? I'm embarrassed to admit that I even asked my son if something happened to him because she was so certain that a normal, healthy childhood could not produce a gay person. So this therapist gaslit this woman who was trying to support her son. So they're really both victims of that. And by the way, this is the Pride counseling, which BetterHelp operates. This is the person that they hired to connect these people with. Okay. I complained. Here's what's crazy. And I have so many papers, so please just bear with me because I literally have like 25 pages of stuff here. I complained and she gaslit me and said that she didn't mean that at all. But she literally said it. Then I went to Psychology Today and found a great therapist. I wasn't going to therapy to even talk about my kids. I was having my own issues, but she brought it up. I'm still mad at her implication that being gay is a quote unquote problem and that it indicates trauma or mental illness. Now I know it's not an isolated issue. Thank you, Jesus. And I appreciate you guys giving me grace, because I am going to take some pauses here, because it makes me so angry that, here's the thing, you don't even have to be a culturally competent therapist to just not spew this hateful rhetoric that it just could not be further from the truth. It's hate speech under the guise of therapy and help. I think you could get someone off the street who could have done a better job with this person than this counselor did. It's just so wild to me, right? And then to complain, and again to be gaslit, and the whole thing. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just taking a minute because this is really absurd. And then the other thing, that BetterHealth says it does, or BetterHelp says that the type of therapy it does to first responders, so counseling for people who work on the front lines, crime scenes, etc., veterans, and COVID-19. Company offers the counseling to doctors and other healthcare professionals who have worked or are working on the front lines of the pandemic. So here's the thing. To me, I don't know that you need all the separation of different groups. A trauma-informed, well-educated therapist should be able to do a lot of this. Now, there are some great, having specifically something for police, first responders, firefighters, things like that, veterans, that's all great. I'm not saying it's not, but I just feel you guys get how I feel. Okay. So types of BetterHelp sessions they offer, again, going back to the chat room thing. So here's what's confusing to me. A person can opt to talk with their designated therapist via a chat room at any time. While people can access this message service whenever they wish to, a therapist may not respond immediately. What is that then? I don't get what that is. That doesn't make any sense. And also for me, I would just never feel comfortable doing therapy via chat. And plus, I'm 43. I'm technically an elder millennial or a geriatric millennial, which nothing has ever described me better. I was born in 81. So I'm that weird generation that it's like, what are you? I don't know. But I didn't grow up with a ton of technology. Obviously I use it now, but I don't know. There's something that feels really impersonal about that. Whole feature, and I just feel like there's a million ways that can go wrong. Now, there's a live chat option where you can schedule a session through the live chat function. It's similar to chat room. However, people can message their therapist and receive messages in real time. Okay. And then phone session, obviously, we know what that is. And then a video session. Okay. So and then here's the other thing that's important to note before I talk about the major controversy. The BetterHelp offers a journaling option for people who want to write down and explore their thoughts and feelings, but it's all through the BetterHelp thing. Okay. And so there was a huge privacy breach that I am going to talk about. But you're going to want to keep all this in mind, right? If you're journaling online, if you're filling out these forms that are very vulnerable information and there are privacy breaches, that's a big deal. Confidentiality and HIPAA in terms of any medical, mental health, it is the absolute gold standard necessity. Unequivocally, hands down, confidentiality, crucially important. We cannot trust somebody if we think that our information, there's going to be something done with it, right? So that is what, that is what I want to say before getting to the major controversy. But first, I want to talk about who are the BetterHelp therapists, because I did get some information from professionals that I want to share before I start talking about the data breach and things like that. So this is what BetterHelp says, okay? And by the way, I talk to lots of my therapist friends about this. I have therapist friends in real life. I have my own therapist that I talk to about this stuff. And then I have my therapist peeps on Instagram. Shout out to you all. Thank you. Adore you. You're I just love having that community with people. So this is what BetterHelp is saying, and then I'm going to read you actual testimonials. Okay. So BetterHelp has a large network of qualified therapists. The company states it ensures that all its therapists have undergone full training, licensing, and accreditation, and they must have a master's or doctoral degree in their chosen field. They must have 3 years of previous experience. BetterHelp asks all therapist applicants to verify their identity and provide license documentation. The company then cross-references this information with the therapist state's licensing board. After BetterHelp verifies this information, the applicants must complete a graded case study and a video interview. This is hilarious, y'all. BetterHelp states that through this process means the company only accepts 25% of applicants, and I'm just going to call bullshit on that. And so let me read you some testimonials. Okay. My friend who got her, well, I'm not going to say specifically what. She was recently licensed in the field. When she was looking to work from home, she looked into BetterHelp, and she said they did not even ask for proof of her credentials, and she immediately knew that was a red flag and decided not to go with this company. Okay. There is also, okay. Therapist, professional, provider. BetterHelp was a terrible platform to be on as a therapist. I still see one client on there for a whopping $23 a session. It is laughable. Another one from another therapist says, my experience doesn't feel like they really care about clinicians or the client. And the therapists are set up to almost fail and be bombarded by the algorithm they work off of, which is similar to Instacart. That's so wild. And if you don't accept clients or respond to the many clients on time, they shut down the therapist capabilities to access clients, y'all. That is wackadoo. That is just so beyond concerning that a therapist wouldn't even have full agency over their own caseload. Like, that is insane. This person goes on to say, you have to email them and explain like why you were late to respond or something, and they will turn back on the capabilities and let you know if you don't respond in a timely manner, it will be shut down again. Payment seems to work off their algorithm as well, because there have been times where I only spoke to one client due to only being able to maintain one client and have gotten a deposit for like $4. It's more clients. It's like the more clients you have, the more money you can make, but all the therapists are not paid fairly at all. And side note, she thinks I'm doing amazing and loves my podcast. Thanks, boo. And then here's another, so from another professional. There was also the issue of them supposedly leaking a bunch of client information. It's not supposed. I will share that next. I won't do that to my clients. Confidentiality is so important in our work. Agree. The system also wouldn't work a lot of the time. They also advertised it like you could schedule and see a therapist that day. And I had many people get very upset that it was basically an on-call therapist as it was advertised. They definitely lure people in saying they will be paid well, but it's not possible to see that many people and be a good therapist who is present. Correct. That was what I was saying before in terms of advocating for therapists, because seeing 40 clients a week is unmanageable for anybody. And there's people listening to me right now that are doing it. You cannot be a good present therapist and a healthy person and participating in your family and your life when you're so overworked that you're burning out just to make money. Okay. They definitely lure. Okay. Wait, no. I said that already. I heard a lot of stories from people getting therapists who were not even really listening. It was horrible. I hate that they are harming vulnerable people who are genuinely looking to get help. And that's why I am doing this. And in addition to, so there is something else wild with BetterHelp where they would divert people. So there's something called Care Dash. Okay. I got a tip off about this. So, the Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, I looked online and I saw that they had complaints about BetterHelp because they said the company provides a public online portal to search for therapists and healthcare providers, but the professional profiles showed up without consent. So in other words, therapists who were not associated with BetterHelp, this CareDash place was essentially taking their information, putting it up on the internet as saying, like, this is a person with CareDash that you could see. And then essentially when the person would click on that profile, it would reroute them to BetterHelp. Come on, dude. Come on, man. And BetterHelp and CareDash, of course, have an affiliate relationship. Jesus. It is just insane. It just is so absurd. Okay. So those are the professional experiences. And now I'm going to talk about the controversy. And, I have information from the Better Business Bureau, and I have information for those of you who are watching this on video. It is from the Federal Trade Commission. And I have that printed out as well. So let me look into that. Okay. So as I was saying before with the therapists, what they do, so I actually went to BetterHelp's website to kind of look at what the hell was going on. And I found, as I was doing that, I found this article. Federal Trade Commission says online counseling service BetterHelp pushed people into handing over health information and broke its privacy promises. This is dated March 3rd of 2023. March 3rd of 2023. Okay. That's, a year ago, but, I mean, that's still fairly recent. So here is the controversy. Okay. 2023, as I mentioned, the Federal Trade Commission suggested that BetterHelp broke its privacy promises. The FTC says BetterHelp took health information from individuals during its intake questionnaire and sold it to advertisers, including Facebook, Snapchat, Criteo, it's Criteo, Criteo, I don't know how to pronounce that, and Pinterest from 2017 to 2020. BetterHelp allegedly used users' sensitive information to target social media adverts, encouraging them to refer their friends and family to the service. In March 2023, the FTC banned BetterHelp from sharing customers' data for targeted advertising. The company had to pay $7.8 million to affected customers, ask for consent before using their health information, revise its privacy policy, and implement a data retention schedule. This means there is now a limit on how long the company can hold on to people's data. Oh, mother of God. Okay, so this is what the actual article from the Federal Trade Commission says. I highlighted some parts of it because I'm not going to read the whole thing because this podcast would be 4 days long. So Federal Trade Commission says the company repeatedly pushed people to take an intake questionnaire and hand over sensitive health information through unavoidable prompts. That's true. I went to the website. I saw it myself. And a promise to keep that information private through statements like, rest assured, any information provided in this questionnaire will stay private between you and your counselor. But from the FTC's perspective, a truthful statement would have been, rest assured, we plan to share your information with major advertising platforms, including Facebook, Snapchat, Criteo, and Pinterest. So again, proposed FTC settlement with BetterHelp includes $7.8 million for partial refunds for BetterHelp customers and conveys an unmistakable message about just how seriously the FTC takes this kind of betrayal of trust. Good. I am so glad that people are on this because it's not okay. So since BetterHelp was founded, more than 2 million have signed up, entrusting the company with their personal information, blah, blah, blah. They say that the company collected, quote, general and anonymous background information about you, and rest assured that it would stay private. But they actually despite those promises, used a wide variety of tactics to share the health information of over 7 million consumers with platforms, as I mentioned, for the purpose of advertising. So in 2017, BetterHelp allegedly uploaded the email addresses of all current and former clients to Facebook, nearly 2 million in total, to target them with ads to refer their Facebook friends to BetterHelp for mental health purposes. That's disgusting. And that's not all. According to the complaint, BetterHelp broke its privacy promises by disclosing to Snapchat the IP and email addresses of approximately 5.6 million former visitors to target them with BetterHelp ads. In addition, for a 6-month period, the company disclosed to Criteo the email addresses of over 70,000 visitors, including people who had looked into Pride counseling and Faithful counseling. So essentially, taking vulnerable populations of people who would not want their medical information to get out and just sold it to third-party people for advertising so that they could make money and live in their mansions and, I don't know, cackle like evil people at night. I have no idea. Like, I don't understand. I mean, I do understand. It's all about money. The last thing that I'm going to say, because I'm going to talk about reputable places, but here's a major thing when it comes to BetterHelp. BetterHelp pages displayed multiple seals from third parties. Among them was a depiction of the medical caduceus, or caduceus. I think it's pronounced caduceus. The caduceus, the medical caduceus, is that sign, right? The T with the snakes, the medical seal, essentially, and then displayed the term "quote unquote" HIPAA. So the complaint alleges that BetterHelp's use of the visual signals falsely signaled to consumers that a government agency or third party had reviewed the company's practices and determined that they met HIPAA requirements when that was not the case. Anyone can use the medical caduceus symbol or a HIPAA symbol. So that doesn't mean jack squat. And to me, again, it's like, okay, one thing doesn't necessarily mean anything, but when you look at this one thing with the other one thing and that one thing, it just adds up to an unmistakable issue, if I'm being honest with you. So here is what the BetterHelp, I'm going to tell you, here's what BetterHelp, what they're doing now in terms of the advertising. And, so I went to the site, okay, because I wanted to know, here's what it says about the privacy policy now. It says the company uses multiple layers of encryption to safeguard user data, with one layer for general browsing and a second added layer for subscribers and their counselors. But if the company behind this is selling the data, well, that doesn't really matter. The company states, here's the thing, that it does not share data with insurance companies, which is the people that it should be shared with so that it can be covered by insurance, but BetterHelp doesn't use insurance. That's the key. And counselors follow all local and federal privacy guidelines, including HIPAA. Okay, so here's what I want to ask. Who is in charge of making sure all of these counselors who are on BetterHelp are following HIPAA and being ethical? Who's responsible for that? I'm going to guess nobody. And as evidenced by more testimonials that I'm going to read about the blatant lack of quality control with the people working with these companies. Okay, so I went to the actual BetterHelp website, and the first thing that pops up is, and I'm going to read this to you, the first thing that pops up is, we process personally identifiable information known as PII and personal health information known as PHI to conduct our businesses and provide you with effective service as described in our privacy policy. Some data processing and sharing is required for our product to function and cannot be disabled. If you click I agree, we may also share PII with third-party advertising partners to deliver more relevant ads and with analytics partners to improve our services, i.e., make them money. to learn about who we share your data with and why, or to opt out, go to sharing settings. Okay. So I did this. I couldn't even get on the website without clicking either I agree or sharing settings. So I'm going to walk you through all of it. So sharing settings. So if I recommend, don't blindly agree to this because, and I'm going to explain to you why. And if you did, don't panic. Don't panic. It's okay. There's probably a way to either change the privacy settings, talk to your therapist about it. Don't panic. It's, this is not for panicking. It's just, I'll talk at the end about how to kind of, if you feel like you're in this situation, how to get into a better space. Okay. So don't panic. Sharing settings takes you to a minefield of online data that people are just agreeing to blindly when they click I agree. So what this place does is they count on you, right? You're anxious to get help. You're anxious to fill out these forms. You're just going to click, you're going to agree, and you're just going to go on. But when you do that, I'm going to explain what you're agreeing to. So the necessary operations, which are always active. It says, we process data we consider necessary for the website to function and operate, regulate and monitor user experience, assess attribution internally, control data ingress, comply with laws and your indicated preferences, and provide security. You cannot opt out of this processing. We share this data with trusted service providers, but not with third-party advertisers or analytics companies. Okay, so there is a way to do better health and just choose this necessary operations and then deactivate all of the rest. What's all the rest, you ask? Analytics, advertising, and third-party advertisers, which include Meta, TikTok, Snap, and Reddit. Reddit, y'all. They are selling people stuff to Reddit. What on God's green earth? It's too much selling of your data. It's insane. So here's the thing. There's two sides to this coin, right? We all live our lives electronically. How many times has Apple sent a user agreement that's 75 pages long and I need to update my iPhone or get my new iPhone up and running, and you click accept and you move along your way? Okay. So what I want to normalize is in this digital age, it is common for us to accidentally sign our life or rights away without knowing it. And sometimes it feels like they kind of have you by the ear in terms of, if you're doing an online therapy thing, there are going to be factors like this with that. But here's the thing. So what BetterHealth got in trouble for before, because they were doing this and not telling people, they're doing the same thing. They're just telling you and getting you to agree to it. That's the difference. They're still selling people's protected information to, again, analytics, advertising. And the fact that there's analytics, right? There's advertising, and then there's also third-party advertisers. That's too many advertisers. That's just too much. So on HIPAA and privacy, any platform you use needs to follow the federal guidelines known as HIPAA. This set of guidelines ensures that health information stays between you and your doctor. So here's what you want to do. Okay, now I'm going to start to get into what we can do. Look for third-party verification, such as credential from NCQA or URAC. I'll say that again. Third-party verification, such as credentials from NCQA or URAC, to confirm that the company offering therapy is actually following the rules they claim to be following. Okay. So going back to the Better Health and what they promise and, all those things. So again, I went to the Better Health website and I agreed to whatever the lowest setting was just to get on the site to see, I just wanted to test it out. I wanted to see what questions they would ask me. So when I went to apply to be a counselor, they give you a list of, do you have a doctorate degree? Do you have a master's degree? Are you a social worker, licensed professional counselor, whatever, right? And you click that. Okay. So then here's the prompts. It says, where do you currently spend most of your time? Like inpatient, outpatient, not currently working. They want to know that information, which I find that interesting. How much time is spent on admin / and or billing related tasks? Okay, so what immediately I knew what this was doing is, remember before I talked about how as therapists, the client hours are one thing. Let's say you do 30 client hours a week, right? Well, then you have to write the notes. Data assessment plan, documentation is extremely important when it comes to therapy. It's equally as important as the therapy itself, because for many reasons, especially if we're relying on the insurance company to cover the client's insurance claims, we have to make a case for medical necessity, right? So a lot of times insurance companies, they'll ask for treatment plans and notes and things like that. Better Health doesn't use insurance. They don't really accept insurance. And there's a reason for that, because when you're going through insurance, there's safeguards and there's requirements and there's things that you have to do that I feel like some of these online platforms, they just don't want to get their hands messy. They don't want to deal with people in crisis. They don't want to deal with insurance. They just want to make bank off the backs of other people. And so that really irritated me. And so the other questions then, because what it's priming you for, if I'm not being clear, is, hey, here at Better Health, you can make $100,000 a year and not have to do all of these tasks that you had to do being a therapist in the real world. And it's like, that's kind of a red flag, because sometimes clients, like for case management, they just need that. And again, so going back to what I was saying is that we don't get paid. So if you're in private practice and you are writing your notes, we're not getting paid for that. We're only paid for direct client time. So if you have to go to court with someone, if you have to write a letter for someone, if you have to contact the care team to be a nucleus of care, which again, a lot of therapists don't want to do that because you don't get paid for it. So half of it in private practice is like you're doing all of this work, but a lot of it you're not getting paid for. And that leads to burnout, and it's just like, it's a hard system. And so they ask then also, what makes you most interested in Better Health? How much time do you intend to spend with clients? Because this again felt like they're fishing for, okay, how do I say this delicately? All people who are in charge of an agency and want to make money, they want therapists who are willing to burn themselves out beyond recognition to make them money. That's the toxicity of this field, is there are very few employers who care about the mental health of therapists. It's, a therapist is told, well, be mindful of your self-care, but also here's a caseload of 50 people. You can't possibly do all this, but you have to do it anyway. So Godspeed. And it's like, well, what the shit is that? Because also, like, as a therapist, you want to practice what you preach, right? But like sometimes if you're trying to feed your family and pay rent and bills, it's not as easy as people think that it is. So what this is assessing is, how much money is this person going to make us? And then how much time do you want to spend with clients? How did you hear about us? And then name, email, and state licensed in. So obviously I did not do that whole thing because I don't, Better Health is not going to like me after this episode. So I don't even want them to know who I am. But I just thought that line of questioning was interesting. And then here's what's wild. So here's BetterHelp's, how they lure in therapists. It says private practice with no doors and no overhead. Okay. You decide how much you want to work and when you're available. We'll take care of the client referrals and billing details. It includes a $650 monthly health benefit stipend, which you'll be happy to know the fine print of that says eligibility for this stipend requires a continuous commitment of 30 hours a week. 30 client hours on an online therapy app is a lot of hours. It's a lot of hours in person. It's a lot of hours. Like, people, again, you have to keep in mind hearing this. When you think of a typical 40-hour work week, as I just mentioned, if you're seeing 30 clients, that means that's your 30 hours of direct contact. And then you might be doing another 30 hours of note-taking, insurance referral calls, treatment planning, whatever. So that's what I'm trying to help people understand. It's like you going to work and then being like, you have to work after work too. But that work you're not getting paid for. It's wild. So bonuses and incentives for high performers. Free BetterHelp membership. Hilarious. And free access to 390 plus CEU courses. And the fine print on that is terms and conditions apply. And then BetterHelp does not guarantee a minimum amount of earnings. The above calculator is an estimated based on prevailing factors and incentives. So essentially, okay, what this is saying, and I'm going to show you this, people who are listening, I'm going to explain it. You can't see it, but there is an estimator on BetterHelp that it says, it gives you a slide. So by the way, it says I want to work full-time or part-time. Okay. And it gives a span of 30 hours to 50 hours. And as I said, if 30 hours is the least amount of hours that you can work, that is full time. That is full time. 40 hours is absurd. And 50 is, what are you doing? Like that is insane and not sustainable. And you cannot possibly be present for people if you're doing 50. That's just wild. So what it does is BetterHelp is saying, look, you can earn $100,000 a year if you just become one of our pet projects, earn us a lot of money, we'll give you incentives, and that's that. So, okay, now let me move on to Talkspace. Some issues with Talkspace, and then I'm going to go into some good services that we can use. Oh, wait, you know what? Before I move on to Talkspace, I do want to read some of the Better Health testimonials. Okay. So I have a chronic illness. I tend to find therapists that at least understand it or health in general are better for me. So I got the BetterHelp app and chose a therapist that said she specialized in chronic illness and chronic pain, which I have. The thing about chronic pain is it affects your brain, and I have to focus on not letting me pull into a depression. Absolutely. By the way, I deal with chronic pain all the time. I have a chronic cancer. I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disease. I am in pain literally every day. And so it does impact you in ways, and you need qualified people to understand that. So the BetterHelp therapist I saw a few times seemed to challenge me in a weird way. We were talking once and I was extremely depressed, and I said to her, I'm down and I feel depressed, and logically I don't want to be here and I'm not sad. It's my serotonin is depleted. And she said that the therapist went on, and she went on to say, you seem angry. Are you angry? And antagonized me like that a few times before I finally decided she was hurting me more than helping me. My feelings would be so hurt whenever I spoke to her. I've had 2 other therapists that I loved, so it's not the therapy, it was her specialty, and I feel like she had no idea what she was doing. I deleted the BetterHelp app after that. And by the way, every single one of these that I'm reading, it's to validate their experience and to validate the experience of folks who weren't able to send these in to me. Okay, another BetterHelp. Good for you. I don't have a story as I signed up for what I thought was a local therapist. This is a story about a bait and switch. I immediately called them and had to cancel and delete my information. It was so shady, as they were trying to tell me I could only pause and not cancel because they are not legally allowed to delete medical records. Really? I am married to a lawyer and got a strongly worded legal response and had to make several more calls to get off their list, but I couldn't believe how shady it was. The therapist had a local address and number, but it was fake. Unreal. Okay. So I actually really like the second therapist I matched with on BetterHelp. Again, just goes to show there are good people that work on a bad platform or bad agencies or bad places. There are good therapists there. So don't sleep on those. The first therapist wanted me to discontinue using Lexapro because it isn't solving your problems. It is numbing you to them. Oh my God. The rage. Pause me reading this testimonial. Mental health medication is life-saving for many people. I'm on Lexapro myself. I went through a clinical depression, life-saving for me. I do not like when people say things about medications. Would you tell a diabetic not to use insulin? I am on immunotherapy for cancer treatment. Should I also not do that? I just feel like that makes me so enraged. I can't even tell you. She said, being prescribed an anti-anxiety medication changed my life in such a profound way. I knew that this therapist wasn't for me. I can't wait to hear the episode. Unreal. Okay, another person said, regarding better health, I have to do it every week. It's, this person was talking about in a different country how much it was. And she said that she couldn't afford that. So they came back with $60 a week. And she said so she went through with the therapist. I see mine now biweekly and it's covered. I wanted a specific therapist for PTSD and trauma. I could do 60 biweekly. I told them that and they never heard back. Such a cash grab. So essentially, this was someone who was working on getting a therapist, said, I can only do this much biweekly. And they were like, well, you're not going to make us enough money. So bye. Yeah, that's right on track with what this company is all about. Okay, another BetterHealth. Hi, I hope it's not too late to tell you a story. I started using BetterHelp during COVID. I was suffering from depression and I figured using BetterHelp would help me. I was matched with a therapist who at first I did like. He listened and he seemed to know what he was talking about. He was always doing something during our sessions. Red flag. Driving, cleaning, making coffee. It was strange. That is strange. He also always talked about his experiences with things, about how his use of mushrooms and pot and how he used it as therapy and all. Jesus, Mother of God. Then all of a sudden he started being late to a session or had to reschedule, and I was getting annoyed because I needed help, of course. I felt like everything was falling apart. Then one session he just ghosted me. He didn't show up. He didn't answer my message. I couldn't call out to him. He could only call me. I never heard from him again. I emailed BetterHelp and they just offered me a new therapist at a discount. And I said, no, thank you. I was over therapy. So for the person, oh wait, is there more to this? Okay, yeah. So they said I was over therapy, found it hard to open up to someone again. So I just stopped and was just pissed off. It ruined therapy for me for a few years. I know I needed help. I was too scared it would happen again. I now went back to therapy a couple months ago and was diagnosed with anxiety and panic disorder. The other therapist never once mentioned either of these because he was probably too busy being high and inappropriate. I suffered for years and I still can't get over the fact that the therapist ghosted a patient. Okay. To this person, please know that person isn't qualified to even be a person. That person isn't qualified to even be a human at all. Like, again, I think if you picked up off a relatively regular person on the street, they could probably do a better job of being a therapist than some of these people. And again, it just goes to show there are good therapists and there are bad therapists, and this therapist would be a shitty therapist anywhere. But do not ever let a bad experience deter you from getting the help you need and deserve. Never, never, never. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to help us all get to people where there's good stuff going on. Okay. A couple more testimonials, and then I'm going to go into Talkspace and then some good things that we can do. Okay. BetterHelp. My first counselor told me to leave my husband. That's what therapists should do. Tell people what to do. Yep. Although I wanted to try to make one more attempt at it with make it better without leaving. My second counselor kept trying to talk me out of the BetterHelp platform and take counseling personally through his company. He would tell me how hot I was and that I should leave my husband, and any man at the Elks Club would be lucky to have me. Barf, barf, barf. That is heinous. Heinous. Another one for BetterHelp. So glad you're talking about these platforms. I tried BetterHelp in either late 2020 or early 2021. I had a really difficult and traumatic year in 2019. I was having lots of visa issues due to the pandemic, so I had no insurance. I decided to seek out help with BetterHelp because it's what I could afford at the time, and it was a disaster. And so that's the other thing. Sometimes in terms of getting things covered, there are other options for folks who don't have insurance. And so that's what these companies, they prey on that. People who, they don't have insurance and they can't get it another way. So we're going to talk about that. So she says the therapist showed up to the appointment 15 minutes late and she was really sick, so she couldn't speak throughout the appointment. She kept muting herself to cough or sneeze, which, that sucks. Sometimes therapists do have to go to work sick, or you don't make money. And that's the hard thing there. But I told her what I went through in 2019 and why that was impacting my mental health. And she replied with things like, wow, that's crazy, in no way, as if we were just having a normal conversation, which I found to be unprofessional. Again, it's like, well, was that a good therapist who was just sick and had to work? Or was that someone who just is not great? Either way, that's absolutely unprofessional and not acceptable. Okay, a couple more of these. I got so many testimonials, y'all. This is wild. In response to your story about BetterHelp, I have a quick thing to share. I sought out their help in 2019. I had undiagnosed PTSD from, trigger warning, from a sexual assault that had happened a few years before. I was in an extremely bad place mentally and was using very harmful coping mechanisms. I was matched with one of their therapists, and without ever speaking on the phone or virtually with her and having no rapport built, one of the first things she asked me was for details about exactly what had happened during trigger warning. During the rape. It was horrific to have to type those details out, and I honestly can't remember if I even could or did. I was appalled at her request, so I may just never responded. I've been seeing a wonderful EMDR therapist for years now, not through BetterHelp, and doing much better, which thank goodness. And again, these are listen to your gut, because, that is not appropriate. And imagine having to type that stuff out. Like, it's hard enough to say it. It's just, it's wild. Okay. So last BetterHelp one, I don't necessarily have a horror story, but it was not beneficial when I was paired with a spiritual art therapist. I was expecting something more traditional that wouldn't stress me out even more than I was. She tried to hypnotize me over Zoom, and I just felt like I had to be performative. Also didn't really help in terms of finances. So this is just a good example of how, like I said, when you're doing an intake process, if you're really doing it to try to find the best match, well, then that'll happen. And this is an example of how they may say they're doing it to get a good match, and then in reality, you're totally getting someone who's completely not appropriate. Like, listen, that spiritual art therapist, that may be her jam, and maybe she's great at that, but it was not right for the person. Okay, so I'm going to talk really quickly about Talkspace, because as I was getting into, people were asking me about, well, what about the growth therapy and Talkspace and all these things? So Talkspace, I learned that they also had some pretty significant issues, and there is a current class action lawsuit against them out now, which is public record, so you can Google it. So Talkspace is a popular text-based therapy option. Offers weekly 30-minute video therapy sessions, which is not enough. With like a session should be 45 to 55 minutes. In conjunction with unlimited text, audio, and video messaging interactions. So for weekly video sessions plus messaging, the company's subscription plan costs $99 per week, billed monthly. It has discounts and other promotions available, as does, if I'm being honest, BetterHelp. They say that they do too. But a lot of companies can say that they offer this, but then we just heard that story about someone who had financial issues and they didn't want to work with her at all. So I just think a lot of this is lingo, is language, it's cover your ass, it's CYA, but I doubt they're practicing what they're preaching. So there's an article called Talkspace. It's called Inside the Messy World of Anonymous Therapy App Talkspace from The Verge. Now, this was an article from December 19, 2016, in fairness. So things may have changed. By the way, BetterHelp, they have as of 2022, they have a new CEO. Their old CEO doubled down about a lot of the things that they were doing wrong, just doubled down, lied, said it wasn't true when it was true. So they do now have a different CEO. I know nothing about him. And so Talkspace, they may have cleared some of these issues up. In fairness, I'm not sure, but I'd be real concerned. So this is what this Verge article outlined about Talkspace, citing internal memos and emails and numerous interviews with anonymous therapists on the platform. The Verge reported several troubling findings, including that Talkspace monitored conversations between therapists and patients, required therapists to insert scripts into their chats promoting Talkspace services. Come on. And didn't have a comprehensive or adequate plan for handling situations where patients who are anonymous on the platform were in danger. Okay, so the Talkspace CEO at the time, Oren Frank, declined to comment and penned a lengthy response denying this. And again, Talkspace now, they have a new CEO as well. John Cohen is their chief executive officer of Talkspace as of September 2022. Here's the problem, some of the problems with Talkspace, okay? The fact that the platform allows clients to remain anonymous is problematic because it prevents therapists from doing things they're ethically bound to do, like reporting threats of suicide or homicide. In some states, therapists can even be sued for failing to report certain things, which is, there's a Tarasoff case about, duty to warn and things like that. So we legally, if we do not report these things, we can lose our license. And therapists can, so Talkspace, therapists have to request any identifying information about their client from the company. And at least in some cases, Talkspace has refused to comply. The CEO at the time patently denied the claim in his response. And the notion that the company can read chats, it isn't entirely clear about the circumstances in which it does. It raises concerns about privacy and confidentiality and may have spurred the August HIPAA complaint by a therapist on the platform. So there is a current class action lawsuit, which I'm going to get to, based on these issues. It threatens to undermine the trust relationship between patients and therapists, which, speaking from my experience, the rapport, the therapeutic rapport, the relationship is so absolutely crucial in therapy. It is like the foundation for a house. If the foundation for a house isn't built right, or if it's cracked, or if it's wonky, the whole house is going to be screwed up. The foundation for therapy is trust, confidentiality, and therapeutic rapport. So the notion that a therapist might be required to insert a script into a therapy session promoting Talkspace, it says it's just like wild. So currently the Better Business Bureau gives Talkspace a B, but there's many complaints about them online. And Better Health, actually, they do have pretty decent Better Business Bureau. They have an A- rating. So they have accreditation since 2015. Customer rating of Better Health is 4.1 out of 5 stars based on 560 reviews. However, there's a lot of less favorable reviews on Better Health about reimbursement issues, billing problems, lack of counselor availability, difficulty agreeing with the format, people only being offered live chat sessions when they requested a phone or a video session. It's like, how can we get paid but not have to do the work? On Trustpilot, BetterHelp has an average customer rating of 4.5 out of 5 stars, and there's 7,000 reviews. So some people have had good experiences, but more critical reviews talk about unexpected charges, lack of regular appointments, difficult to find therapists with experience in certain areas, such as concerns affecting the LGBTQIA+ communities, stuff like that. So the last thing I'll say before we move on to what are the good things, the Talkspace class action lawsuit, plaintiff, I redacted the name, on behalf of herself and other similarly situated individuals, brings this class action complaint and demand for jury trial against defendant Talkspace to stop it from misleading patients and unlawfully enrolling them in automatically renewing subscription program. Plaintiff alleges as allows upon personal knowledge as to herself and her own acts and experiences. Okay, so it's a lot of legal jargon, but I do have 2 stories about Talkspace. So this one person said, I have not a horror story, but I learned a frustrating lesson using my employer-backed telehealth option Talkspace for psychiatry. Because some offer psychiatry, some just therapy. She said, I had to apply for short-term disability to do ongoing panic attacks at work, and Talkspace was my main provider. They are not licensed to provide any paperwork for the insurance company. Remember, that was the issue I talked about before. For the insurance company working on my Social Security disability claim. So if it weren't for the fact that I had previously used a very expensive therapist who I was taking a break from for financial reasons, she happened to be familiar with the ongoing situation that started a year prior. She would have been without any medical backing. So that's the problem with some of these agencies, is that if they don't want to work through your insurance and they don't want to do proper documentation, if you have a work, what do they call that? Like a claim, workers' comp, or you're looking for Social Security disability, these places aren't going to help you at all. Because here's what I'll tell you in real life. It's a pain in the butt to do that. I've applied for disability and got denied 3 times, even though I literally have 10 actual very significant health diagnoses, which don't even get me started on that. So it brings up the issue of, with disabilities and Social Security work claims, things like that, these are not going to be the platforms that are going to be able to be helpful with that. So just an FYI in that. And then there was one testimonial about growth therapy. My therapist spent more time telling me her trauma in response to mine than had the audacity to ask me if I verbally consented, trigger warning, if I verbally consented to a sexual assault in college when I had previously disclosed I was assaulted while incapacitated. Oh my God. This is taking a toll on my mental health, y'all, because I'm telling you, the call's coming from inside the house, and it really upsets me when, you're a helper and you sometimes know what help looks like. Okay. Now on to the good stuff. So this is from a New York Times article called The Online Therapy Services We'd Use by Nancy Red, and it was updated February 9th, 2024. So you can all Google that. They have a whole list of everything that they did, because I was like, well, why should I listen to these people? So after putting in more than 100 hours of research over 5 years and trying appointments on 8 video therapy platforms in different states. So they basically did testing. And here are the 3 that can be recommended. So I'm going to talk about recommended platforms versus recommended search engines to find a therapist, right? Because like Psychology Today is different from a BetterHelp type of platform. One helps you get to a qualified therapist, and the one is the site, if that makes sense. So number 1 is MD Live. This platform is accredited by the National Committee for Quality Assurance. So that's what I said before, NCQA. That's what that stands for, National Committee for Quality Assurance. This recognition provides assurance that the company follows best practices for providing high quality care. MD Live also has a certificate from the Hitrust Alliance, an independent organization that evaluates data security. This means it's more likely that the company makes every effort to ensure your information is safe and your sessions are truly private. So MD Live takes some insurance. The platform has a maximum of $108 in out-of-pocket costs per 45 to 60-minute session, whether the therapist has a doctorate degree or not, making it the lowest price of our picks. So MD Live. And for those for those of you who follow me on Instagram, I will post an entire post about all these. So you don't write it down. I'm sure there's people that are furiously writing right now. Write it down, but I'll also post about it on my Instagram. Okay, number 2 recommended. It's called Amwell. Accredited, again, by the NCQA as well as by the Utilization Review Accreditation Commission, URAC. It's also Hitrust-certified, but it had far fewer therapists to choose from in almost every state we considered. At $109 for a 45-minute session, the maximum out-of-pocket costs are only $1 more than MD Live's, unless you want to see a therapist with a doctorate degree versus a master's. That adds another $21 to the session. Amwell accepts some insurance, and the platform offers a surprisingly unique feature that some people may find appealing, which is you can hide view of your face on your own screen during the appointment. I wouldn't love that as a therapist, but clients should have the right to privacy in whatever way they choose. So for me, that wouldn't be a helpful practice, but for someone, maybe it could be. And then the last one is Doctor on Demand by Included Health. It's also NCQA and URAC accredited and Hitrust-certified. Hitrust-certified. It's the only one of our picks that sees children of all ages, because that's the other thing here. We're seeing a lot of exclusion of certain groups, children especially, and I don't like that, because listen, the angry adults that are walking around here would have been much better off if they had access to therapy as a child. So, I mean, that's wild. So, but here's the thing. It's $184 per 50-minute session. It's the priciest service that they tested. So like our other picks, it does accept some insurance, which may help to defer some of those out-of-pocket costs. It's almost always offered far fewer therapist choices than MD Live. And it uses your computer's location to determine therapist availability, limiting your scheduling options, blah, blah, blah. But if you find a therapist you like through it, it's a safe and secure platform. Okay. So those were their three main picks. Now here's another option that I saw, which I didn't even know about. So if you want the lowest price for self-pay online therapy, Walmart Health Virtual Care, I could not believe this, costs $85 for a 50-minute session, either via video or phone. That makes it the lowest cost option of any platform offering therapy with licensed mental health professionals we tested by far. So quite a few providers available were in 2 weeks in all of the states they checked. On this NCQA accredited platform. Our tester found it easy to schedule and access their appointment. Sign-up page has fields for gender labeled other or unspecified, which makes the site feel more inclusive. However, Walmart Health Virtual Care doesn't take insurance as a direct form of payment, though you can submit receipts to your insurance to see if reimbursement is possible, which is always such a pain, but that is an option. Okay, so now these are online platforms that you can use that are safe, that are trusted, that are accredited. And, again, do your own research. Noting those 3 certifications that I mentioned, you can use those and Google that. But what I'm going to do now is share about online therapist finding services that are very inclusive. And I didn't know some of them existed. So that is what I want to share with you all right now. Okay, the best one that I know about that I always talk about, and this is not an ad because literally no one sponsors my podcast. Please, hello, anyone listening, please, does anyone want to sponsor me? But Psychology Today, they don't sponsor me, but I just love them. They're just the most well-known therapist finding website. They do absolutely validate credentials. They are verified. You can search through so many therapists. You can, look at insurance network participation. You can look at self-pay because some people don't want to go through their insurance too, right? Like I get that. And that's also an option, but you can filter it by practice specialties, insurance network participations, therapist gender, patients as they treat from toddlers to elders, preferred languages, faith, sexuality, and ethnicity served. So I joke that it's like Tinder for therapists, but without the sex part, or at least it should be without the sex part. That is one that I highly, highly, highly recommend. But here's some other ones. Alma, it's ALMA. It's a newer nationwide therapist network that is free to use for people seeking therapists. So first you input the type of therapy you're looking for, individual, couples, family, or child, as well as your zip code, whether you're using insurance and whether you're seeking online, in-person, or both types of sessions. You can search available therapists by their identity, specialty, languages spoken, therapeutic approach, degree, etc., and whether the provider offers sliding scale fees. Therapists pay a monthly fee to be listed. So the differences between things like this that help you find a therapist. So I want to be clear about this. There are many reasons people need to do telehealth therapy. If based on what I've said, some of these platforms don't feel safe to you, what I'm telling you is that you can search through some of these search engines and still see if a therapist will do Zoom, but you just go through the therapist. You don't have to go through a platform, is what I'm saying. So I just want to be really clear about that. Okay, there's another one. The Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapists find a CBT therapist. So it's a searchable nationwide index of therapists who practice CBT. And there's a whole search for that. There is also something called Inclusive Therapists, offers an extensive therapist database searchable by identifiers such as disabled, transgender, neurodivergent, whether they are a person of color, and provider identity, among many other things. And it talks about virtual availability, whether they take insurance, work on a sliding scale. And to be clear, a sliding scale is like if you are disabled and you have your W-2s and your tax returns that show, that your monthly income is like almost nothing, all therapists, all good therapists and agencies should have a sliding scale based on your income. And if they don't, then it's a chance that it's a money grab. But anyone that I know that does good work, there is a consideration for this because therapy should be accessible to everybody. Okay, now the next search engine is called Therapy for Black Girls. It's an international therapist finder meant for Black women and girls seeking a Black licensed therapist. You could search by location, whether you could do in person or Zoom, all those other things. And I think that this is really important because there's a lot of Black therapists that I follow on Instagram, and in the therapy realm, there is a significant lack of therapists in the BIPOC community. So Black, Indigenous, people of color, their voices, their experience are so important. And so for a lot of folks, who may be Black are saying, they want a provider. And again, there's not just for women. There is something for men as well. One second. Therapy for Black men includes listings for 45 states plus the District of Columbia. It offers therapist finding services designed for Black men seeking a Black licensed therapist of any gender. So, yay. That's, that's amazing. There's also Therapy for Latinx, connects patients to Latinx therapists nationwide. There is South Asian Therapists, has a global directory of therapists who intentionally serve the South Asian diaspora. So you can search available therapists by location, region, type of session, preferred language, on the I'm sorry, I'm talking so long that I'm getting tongue-tied. South Asian Therapists Global Directory. Then there's the National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network, which offers therapist finding services designed for queer and trans Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. Yay. The Neurodivergent Therapist Directory helps connect neurodivergent therapy seekers with neurodivergent therapists across the U.S. and internationally. And then there's something interesting. So for a $65 upfront lifetime membership fee, it's called Open Path Psychotherapy Collective, provides access to a directory of therapists willing to work on a sliding scale. So I found that and I was like, oh, that's great. So it's a referral agency like Psychology Today, except they cater to people who are uninsured or underinsured. And it has some membership restrictions like household income. So like if you make a lot of money, like this is not going to be, like it's more towards people that I was just talking about who need sliding scale. And the last one is called Headway. It's a startup that is free to use for people seeking therapists who are insured with certain insurance providers. Therapists pay a commission for every appointment booked. It's currently available in 48 states plus District of Columbia. Okay, y'all, I'm exhausted. Whew, my God. Thank you for hanging in there with me. I truly hope that this episode has been educational And, again, my message is, please know there is help available. There are good therapists out there. Please do not give up if you have a bad experience. I will put all of these, everything that I just listed, I will do like a page for social media. I will post that. Anything I've said, I got off of, information that you could find on the internet. So anything I said, feel free to Google that. DM me if you have questions. I just am such a fierce voice for marginalized groups, and I'm such an ally. And it actually makes me so sad that there are people out there who have been so harmed by people in this field who are unwell and unprepared. And I think the message with all of this is that if you've had a bad experience on one of these platforms, you may have been just talking to a layperson, truly, who wasn't professional and wasn't, didn't have credentials. If people can lie about credentials, and if they're not being checked, then what's to stop them from, spreading their harm? So please self-advocate, use your gut. I'm here to be an advocate for all of us. I will continue to be a voice, a very loud one. And it was my pleasure to talk about all this today. So thank you so much for listening. Please take care of yourselves and each other. And now it is time for my much needed disclaimer for this podcast. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and are not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.